The first thing my mother did after being reborn was on the day of the divorce. She gave up fighting for my custody. Give me 5 million and the child is yours. After saying that, she turned and walked away. I didn't cry or make a scene. I quietly took my father's hand. Because I had been reborn too. My father hugged me excitedly, kissing me on the left cheek, then again. Good girl, Zoe. I told you your mother wouldn't want you. I remained silent. He saw my hurt and tried to comfort me. It's okay. Stay with Daddy, I'll spoil you properly. Really? I gave a bitter laugh. My eyes still wouldn't leave my mother's retreating figure. But she didn't look back, she climbed into that car. Ha, your mother is something else, just divorced me and immediately got into some stranger's car. What a shameless woman. I lowered my head. In my last life, even after my parents divorced, I went with Mom. She never once said a bad word about Dad in front of me. She always said, Zoe, no matter what happens between your father and me, he will always love you. I believed that too. Until, 1 week after my parents divorced. I couldn't help it and called Mom. But I found the call had been blocked by her. And when I asked Dad again about Mom's whereabouts, he frowned and said impatiently, You're already with your father, so don't ask about your mother anymore. I already told you, hasn't she abandoned you? She's just a heartless, unfaithful woman. From my father's mouth, I learned that my mother had, a week ago on the day of the divorce, already completed the paperwork to go abroad, leaving with her university advisor's son. To continue her studies. My father was bitter about it. He regretted having agreed too quickly. The divorce papers had been signed too decisively. He hadn't discovered my mother's affair sooner. If he had, he could have thrown her out without spending a penny, forcing her to leave with nothing. But I knew. My mother had given up studying abroad and surrendered her own dreams for my father. In the 2nd year of their marriage, she had me. At first I thought that the 3 of us would live happily like that. But soon, Dad began coming home less and less. At first, Mom would still smile and tell me that Dad was busy with the company's startup phase. Until Dad forgot their wedding anniversary, leaving Mom to make dinner and wait at home all night. Later, he forgot my birthday. Mom could no longer delude herself. So, unable to bear it any longer, she filed for divorce. Seeing the disappointment on my face, Dad realized how harsh his tone had been. He smiled and picked me up. Be good, Zoe. It's Daddy's fault, your mother, her, sigh. Anyway, in the future I'll find you another mother. She'll be at least 100, 1,000 times better than your mother. My brow twitched. A month after my parents divorced, Dad brought a new auntie into the house. I knew her. She was Sophia, the new assistant my father had hired at his company. In the previous life, Dad would always complain at dinner about his new assistant being clumsy, unable to do anything right. His tone was contemptuous. Mother even spoke up for her. Oh, she's just a recent female college graduate, it's not easy for her, cut her some slack. Later, when Dad mentioned her again, the irritation was gone and his tone had softened into amusement. At that time, Mom had cautiously asked Dad, have you been mentioning Sophia a bit more than usual lately? Dad's expression grew awkward. He snapped at Mom, half angry, half ashamed, can you stop being so petty? I only said a few more words about an employee and you get jealous. Do you want me to fire every woman who works at my company for your sake? Mom looked aggrieved, on the verge of speaking but holding back. In the end she said nothing. Sophia stepped forward, and I called out sister in a sweet voice. She was delighted. Pinching my cheek, she said, Zoe, you have such a sweet mouth. Look at what I bought you, do you like it? I looked at the Barbie she was holding and the white princess dress, my favorite. I tilted my head and smiled. I love it. Thank you, sister. Dad came forward too, pulled Sophia into a hug, his tone indulgent. See, I told you, our Zoe is so well behaved and sensible. I was right, wasn't I? When Dad went off to work, it was just the two of us in the room. Sophia edged forward as if courting favor. Zoe, be honest with me, would you mind if your sister became your new mother? I saw the curiosity in her eyes. I smiled and said, of course I wouldn't mind. She didn't believe me and pressed on. But don't you miss your mom? I answered without hesitation, I don't miss her at all. Dad says she ran off with some man from nowhere and doesn't want me anymore. Besides, my mom is old and ugly, doesn't bother with her appearance, how could she compare to an aunt who's young and pretty? I'd like my sister to be my new mother. My words completely dispelled Sophia's doubts. She breathed a sigh of relief and walked into Dad's study. Through the door, I heard voices from inside. I told you Zoe is only 6, she doesn't remember. As long as you're good to her, she'll be good to you. Humph, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't be anyone's stepmother. Soon, the muffled sounds of kissing and Dad's heavy breathing came from inside. I turned away silently. On the day Dad married Sophia, I was their flower child. From afar, it seemed like I saw someone's figure. It looked a lot like Mom. But when I ran out to follow it, there was nobody there. Of course, Mom really didn't want me anymore. She had already gone abroad to pursue her dreams, how would she ever come back to this place of sorrow? After all, in the last life she had suffered so much for me. In my last life. My parents divorced, and my mother insisted on getting custody of me no matter what. But she had no job, while my father ran a company. So her chances of winning custody weren't very high. My mother filed for divorce and demanded half of my father's assets. But my father smiled and said the company was registered under my grandparents' names. It didn't belong to him, including the house and the car. Only then did my mother realize that from the moment they married, my father had been calculating everything. All this time, my mother had trusted him and never dealt with those matters. She never expected that the person lying beside her would be the one who had been scheming the most. In the end, Mom gave up everything to get custody of me. She left with me empty-handed. A woman without a job, raising a child alone, how hard that is, no one can imagine. What's worse, Dad had so much money and wouldn't give Mom a single cent in child support. It was 40 degrees, and the little room we rented didn't even have air conditioning. There were no windows, it was stifling. After work, in the evenings, Mom would wipe my body with cool water, over and over, bringing my temperature down. But she herself would be sweating buckets from the heat. Since my parents divorced, Mom couldn't afford the tuition at the elite school. She had no choice but to send me to a cheap public primary school for the time being. Zoe, once Mom makes enough money, I'll put you back in your old school. My previous piano, dance, and calligraphy lessons all stopped as well. Mom blamed herself endlessly for it. I had a bright idea. I hated those classes anyway, they were exhausting. It's better not to go. There was a time when we could eat cake, salmon, foie gras, and Australian lobster whenever we wanted. Now even the prices alone make my mother hesitate. But whenever there was something tasty, my mother would always save it for me first. Mom, the teacher says eating rich meat every day is bad for our health. We should eat more vegetables so our diet is balanced. My mother knew I was trying to comfort her. She held me and sobbed. Overnight, I went from being a lofty princess to the little match girl in the slums. But I never blamed my mother. As long as I'm with her, no matter how hard life is, it always tastes sweet to me. Later, I fell ill, running a high fever and developing pneumonia. My mother rushed me to the hospital at once, but she had no money for treatment. Half conscious, I heard her on the phone begging my father. My father's tone was condescending. He sneered, "What, didn't you say Zoe was handed over to you, that you could take care of her? How is it that in less than half a year, Zoe is already in the hospital?" My mother looked at my fever-flushed face and choked up. "Please, Austin, she's your biological daughter. Just $5,000, and I'll pay the hospital bill. I'll never ask you for a penny again." $5,000. Not even enough for one of Sophia's bags. Not even enough for the fancy grooming for her cat. And yet my father refused. In the end, my mother had no choice but to take out an online loan. I'm cured. But Mom grew more exhausted. She began working 2 jobs, waitressing by day and delivering takeout at night. By the time she came home each day, it was already past midnight. Mom would tiptoe, afraid of waking me. But I still woke up at once. Once, Mom thought I was asleep. Holding me, she rocked and muttered to herself. "Zoe, did I make a mistake wanting you?" Actually, I really wanted to tell her. Choosing to stay with her, I don't regret it at all. Sophia had been married less than half a year when she gave birth to a son, Wintert. That day, Father was overjoyed, dancing and gesticulating in the hospital. The Luo family finally has an heir. But before, when Mom and Dad were still in love, Dad used to say he loved daughters the most. Daughters are so considerate, they're Daddy's little padded jacket. Boys are different, they only make me angry. To reward Sophia for carrying on the Luo family line, Father happily bought her a seaside villa at once. Sophia, seizing the moment, also suggested sending me out of the Luo household's house. After all, Wintert isn't her real brother, who's to say she wouldn't lay a hand on my son? Dad frowned. She's still a child, how could that be? Besides, she's my biological daughter no matter what. If word got out that we kicked her out, how awful would that sound? When Sophia saw Dad disagree, she immediately screamed and threatened to take the baby and jump off the building, calling my father heart and soul and darling until he felt sorry for her. In the end, Dad had no choice, but he agreed. On the day they sent me away, he didn't dare meet my eyes. "Your brother is far too delicate, crying and making a fuss all the time. I'm afraid it would affect your studies, so I rented a place for you outside and hired a nanny to look after you properly. Is that all right?" I knew my opinion didn't matter. I nodded and agreed. Dad didn't expect me to be so calm, he agreed so decisively. A little reluctantly, he stuffed a card into my hand. "There's 500,000 on this card. Whatever you want to buy, you can." I smiled sweetly. "Thank you, Dad." When I got into the car, Dad waved at me. The driver, Uncle Wang, felt sorry for me. Mr. Austin is being unfair. After all, you're his daughter, how could he drive you away?" I lowered my eyes. I said nothing. In this world, once there's a stepmother, there will always be a stepfather. I learned that in my previous life. So I wouldn't be heartbroken again. As long as I can grow up quietly in this home. I ask for nothing else. After I moved out, Dad never showed up again. Whenever I messaged him, he would always promise to visit me on the weekend. Later he began to complain that I messaged too often. "Don't keep sending me messages. If your Aunt Sophia sees them, she won't be pleased." I was sensible enough not to post anymore. Occasionally, I would stare at the photo of the three of us and drift off. On my 5th birthday, my parents took me to Disney. It was, in my memory, the happiest day. Dad took me on a roller coaster, we floated together on the water ride, and he brought me to Treasure Cove, the Pirates of the Caribbean-themed area. As night fell and the fireworks show was about to begin, Dad lifted me high. I sat on his broad shoulders. The brilliant fireworks blooming in the sky froze the smiles of the three of us forever in that photograph. Tears kept sliding down. But soon I shook off my sorrowful thoughts. I can't wallow in the past. My mother once told me, "Zoe, no matter what, never give up on your dreams, your career. Studying may not be the only choice in life, but it can give you more options." Right. Study. Since my parents divorced, my grades slipped from the top of the class to the bottom. Now I get up early and go to bed late. I recite English vocabulary every day and read whenever I have a spare moment. If I don't understand something the first time, I read it a second time. Diligence can make up for lack of talent. Besides, I wasn't stupid to begin with. Before long, my grades improved by leaps and bounds. I became top of the class. Later on, I was even top of the year. The teacher's call went through to Dad's phone. When he learned I'd come in first for the year on the final exam, he was overjoyed and, for the first time in a long while, took me home with him. The New Year's coming, your dad's taking you home to celebrate. Watching the hand my father reached out, I hesitated for a moment, then took it. But as soon as we came in and she saw me, Sophia's frown never eased. She even started arguing with my dad right in front of me. Haven't I told you we don't bring outsiders into our home? Not giving Dad any face at all. Dad spoke cautiously, at least, Zoe is my daughter too. I'll just bring her home for New Year, after we eat, I'll take her back. Sophia sneered. Yes, she's your daughter, does that mean Wintert isn't your son? I'm your wife now. Can you stop always bringing your ex-wife's daughter here to spite me? If you don't want to be with me anymore, then let's get a divorce. Wintert is just over 1, his speech still halting. He already treats me like an enemy. Like a little lion, he charged over angrily and bumped into me. Bad person, go away, don't bully my mommy. After speaking, she collapsed to the ground, her sobs shaking the air. She still remembered to fling a cup at me, it shattered on the floor, and the flying shards cut my calf. Dad looked so pained he was almost in tears. He rushed forward, gathered Wintert into his arms, and soothed her. Then, with disgust, he glared at me and shouted, "Why are you still here blocking the view? Get out!" A cold knot formed in my chest. Actually, I had long known Dad loved Wintert more, but he had always been gentle with me. I had been fooling myself. Although Dad had shown me little love, there had still been love. Now, even that last sliver of hope had vanished. I turned and walked out. But I was too young to hail a cab. Besides, it was New Year's Eve and the streets were empty. I stared at the lights in every home, golden, white and bright, full of hope and happiness. Yet now there wasn't a single lamp that belonged to me. I hugged my shoulders and sat on the doorstep waiting for him. I waited for who knows how long. Just as the cold winter wind was about to freeze my limbs, the door opened. "You're still here?" I finally calmed Wintert down, and if he sees you he'll start crying again. My body shook uncontrollably, my teeth chattering from the cold. I have nowhere to go. One sentence left Dad frozen in place. He glanced at the silent street and realized the driver had long since gone home for the New Year. His gaze finally fell on my injured calf. He spoke with a hint of apology. "Zoe, there's nothing I can do either. Look, if you come with me, your aunt will make a scene, and your brother, he's still young. Could I really give up my own son for you?" I looked steadily into my father's eyes and said softly, "But Dad, I'm your daughter too. I'm only 8 years old." My father's eyes darted away. His tone was impatient. "Fine, I never said you weren't my daughter. Isn't this unavoidable? I'll take you back." All the way, I watched the scenery rush past the window. My mind was full of my mother's face. I wondered if, by now, she was living the life she wanted. Was she okay? Without me dragging her down, she should be very happy. Would we ever meet again? In my last life, my mother fainted on her delivery route. The hospital called my elementary school teacher while I was still in class. The teacher's face showed pity. He took me to the hospital. All the way, I clenched my sleeve tightly. The teacher seemed about to speak but stopped. In the end he said nothing. At the hospital, when I saw my mother, a white sheet covered her face. The doctors explained things to us. Heatstroke, sunstroke, too late. Certain words jumped into my ears. But I could not understand them. The mother who had left that morning smiling and had given me a kiss was now lying there, motionless. Finally, the teacher patted my head and said, regretfully, "Zoe, your mother has passed away." I stubbornly stood there, refusing to let them take Mom away. "You're lying, my mom won't die." I shook my mother's body with all my strength. "Mom, wake up, don't sleep, okay? I was wrong, I won't go to school anymore, I'll eat less from now on. Mom, could you please not ignore me? Mom, I'll beg Dad, ask him to give us money, so you won't have to work so hard." Mom. But no matter what I said, she just lay there, her face ashen. It was as if she no longer acknowledged me. As I spoke, the aunts and uncles present began to cry. The teacher choked up, crouched down, and hugged me. Zoe, don't do this. Your mom is exhausted, let her rest. That's right. With me clinging to her like a millstone, Mom was living too hard. At most she slept 4 or 5 hours a day. She ran around every day for money. Even though she was already so tired and had given everything she had, she still felt so guilty toward me. Mom said she was an orphan, that she suffered terribly as a child, and later, with the help of sponsorship, went to university. She studied like crazy, trying to change her fate, but after meeting Dad she still gave up her dreams for love. When she talked about these things, her face always looked very sad. But she would say, I don't regret it, because being with your father gave me you, Zoe. I'm truly happy. But I regretted it. If back then I hadn't chosen Mom, she would have been happy, wouldn't she? At the very least, she'd still be alive. Slowly, I loosened my grip on Mom's hand. For the first time in a long while she could finally sleep. I stopped arguing with her. I behaved myself. I watched, with my eyes wide open, as my mother was pushed into the furnace before me, then swallowed by the great blaze. My heart felt like it was being wrung. My vision kept going dark in waves. I thought, if I could do it over, I wouldn't choose Mom. God had mercy. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my parents divorced. But it seemed my mother had been reborn too. She no longer wanted me. I only felt grateful. Mom, in this life, live for yourself. The 4th year since Mom left. On my 10th birthday. Dad took the initiative to bring me back home. I stood at the doorway, hesitating for a long time, and still didn't go in. Seeing me frozen, Dad looked puzzled. Why aren't you coming in, Zoe? I glanced into the house, Aunt Sophia and my little brother. He gave a forced laugh. Come in, we're all family here. Your Aunt Sophia may have had some objections to you before, but I've already talked to her about it, and now she plans to treat you like her own daughter. I didn't believe my father. But I also didn't want to go against him. As soon as I stepped inside, Sophia was standing by the dining table, a spread of delicacies before her, smiling as she beckoned me over. Zoe, I can't believe how grown up you are, getting prettier by the day. Her tone was oily and ingratiating. Since she had her baby I'd hardly come home at all, after so many years apart it was natural I'd feel this way. She saw that I didn't answer. She gave an awkward smile, told me to sit, and kept putting food into my bowl. Eat up, this is your home now. I've already talked it over with your father. You're about to start middle school, you should be going to a better school. It's his fault for being too busy with work, he hasn't paid attention to your schooling. Sigh, he doesn't care at all, I even had to remind him. But the truth was, she had been the one who cried and fussed back then, refusing to let my father send me to the best private school. She only allowed me to attend the most ordinary public elementary school. I quietly finished the meal. Watching Sophia hesitate to speak, sending him signals with her eyes, while my father, after a long pause, still didn't say a word. That night, I was supposed to go back, but Dad asked me to stay. The house I used to live in had long since become my younger brother's bedroom. I could only stay in the guest room for now. Before going to bed, I asked Dad, do you remember what day it is today? He thought for a moment. What day? Isn't it just Saturday? Oh right, today I forgot to take the cat Aunt Sophia keeps to get its bath. If she finds out she'll blame me again. Alright, get some rest. I closed the door with a self-mocking laugh. Of course, how could Dad possibly remember my birthday? In his mind, I was worth less than one of the cats Sophia keeps. The next day, my luggage from the rental was brought over by Dad. From now on, the 4 of us will live together. I was silent. I neither refused nor agreed. For a while afterward, both Dad and Sophia were very good to me. Uncomfortably good. Until that day. I overheard Dad and Sophia arguing in the bedroom. How long are you going to keep catering to this little emperor? When are you finally going to tell her about donating bone marrow? Dad sighed. Wait a few more days. After all, Zoe is my daughter too. She's still so young, how can I ask her to donate bone marrow to Wintert? Sophia sneered, yes, she's your daughter, you feel for her, you cherish her. But what about Wintert? Isn't he your son? Donating bone marrow won't kill her, but if our son doesn't have the surgery soon, he'll die. Are you going to stand there and watch your own son die? From the bedroom came the sound of something shattering. I stood there stunned. So that's why Dad had been treating me well these past days, he wanted me to donate bone marrow to my brother. I thought I wouldn't be hurt by Dad anymore, but now I couldn't hold back the ache. How I wanted to shout at him. I'm your daughter too. Tears slid down silently. The door suddenly opened. When Dad saw my tear-streaked face, his expression faltered for a moment. He sighed. Since you've already heard, I'll take you to the hospital tomorrow. I looked at him. Not ready to give up, I asked, Dad, I'm only 10 years old. Are you really going to ignore my health for the sake of my brother? He avoided my eyes and waved his hand irritably. What else am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to stand by and watch Winter die? He's your brother too, you should be saving him. I took a deep breath. Dad, these past days, all the kindness you've shown me has been for my brother, hasn't it? He didn't answer. That counted as tacit consent. I gave up completely. I'm not donating. I turned to leave, but my hand was gripped tight by Sophia. Her eyes were venomous as she spat, you will donate whether you want to or not. All these years we've fed you and supported you, and you won't even give a bit of bone marrow back? You ungrateful wretch. I looked to my father for help, but he stood silently to one side. No matter how I struggled, I couldn't break free. In the end, I bit down hard on her arm. She cried out in pain and let go, cursing as she lunged at me. Fists and kicks rained down. My father just watched from the side, cold and indifferent. In the end, I was covered in wounds and Sophia locked me in the basement. It was dark, damp, and filled with the smell of mildew. I could even hear the squeaking of mice. In my last life, the 10-some square meter room my mother and I rented also had mice. But back then, my mother was by my side, and I was afraid of nothing. Now, I am very afraid. How I wish my mother could appear and take me away. But she has probably long since forgotten me. I hug my arms around myself. I comfort myself. It's okay, so long as my mother is doing well, it's all right for me to suffer a little. Donate bone marrow then. Once I'm an adult I can leave this house. Then I'll go abroad to find my mother. The pocket money Dad gave me from time to time over the years I've been saving up by scrimping and scraping. I have the money to find Mom. Thinking of that, I feel filled with courage. I'm not afraid at all. Humming the lullaby Mom once sang to put me to sleep. Enduring the hunger, I slowly fall into dreams. The next day, at first light, Sophia and Dad took me to the hospital. First they ran compatibility tests. A week later, the results showed our match was successful. Dad was ecstatic. He immediately brought me to the hospital and demanded they perform the surgery. After examining my physical condition, the doctor refused to operate. She's so thin, so young, she cannot donate bone marrow. When Sophia heard this, she immediately threw herself into a tantrum in the hospital. Are you trying to kill someone? My son is sick right now, waiting for a bone marrow transplant to save him, and you refuse to operate. What on earth are you trying to do? I tell you, if anything happens to my son, I will not let you off. The doctor was helpless, but still explained patiently, generally, under 18 does not meet the donation criteria. If you force a donation it can be done, but the donor must gain weight. Right now she only weighs 50 to 60 gene, naturally small and weak compared to peers, she needs to be at least 100 gene to donate. You parents can have the child gain weight for a while, and once she meets the standard she can donate. No. I can't wait. Anyway, donating bone marrow won't kill her, so just do the operation on my son, I don't care. Sophia, with a snarling face, yelled at the doctor. The doctor was in a very difficult position. He looked to my father for his opinion. Finally, my father bowed his head and said, "Do as my wife says." The doctor looked at me helplessly again. "Child, are you really willing to donate your bone marrow to your little brother?" I met the pitying gazes around me. My heart ached. I didn't want to, but what good would that do? Dad is my guardian, as long as he agreed, I had no way to resist. I took a deep breath and answered softly, "I am willing." The door suddenly swung open. A familiar, loud voice exploded in my ear. "I am not willing." I turned around sharply. It was the face I had longed for day and night. It was Mom. "Mom, she's back." Dad saw her too. He stood there stunned. I was stunned as well. I couldn't believe it, Mom had truly returned. I stared at her greedily, afraid this might be only a dream. Mom wore a camel-colored wool coat, with a beige undershirt beneath. Her long black hair was silk-smooth and glossy, her fair skin looked as delicate as an eggshell. She looked noble and elegant, beautiful and poised. Was this still the same Mom from my past life, the one with a weary face and sallow, malnourished skin? Claire? Dad was frozen by Mom's beauty. He checked several times to be sure. But Mom stepped forward coldly. She slapped Dad hard across the face. Then she shielded me behind her. "Austin, I entrusted our daughter to you to raise, how did you treat her? You kicked her out of the house, let her live alone, spend the new year by herself, and that's one thing, but now you expect her, at such a young age, to donate bone marrow to your son. I'm telling you. It's impossible." Dad was stunned by the blow and only now came to his senses. Faced with Mom's questioning, he hung his head sheepishly. Sophia pointed at Mom's nose, "You gave up custody of your daughter for 5 million, now she's our daughter, and we can do whatever we want. As for donating bone marrow, she has to donate to my son." Mom sneered, "Yes, I gave custody to Austin before, but things are different now. I'll sue you for abusing Zoe, and I'll get my daughter's custody back." With that said, no matter how wildly Sophia raged and cursed, Mom took my hand and walked out of the room. After we stepped outside, I still felt like I was living in a dream. I walked to a corner. Mom let go of my hand. My heart dropped. I stepped forward cautiously and shook my mother's fingers. "Mom, please don't be angry with me. If you don't want me, that's fine too, but could you tell me where you live? I want to come see you." I hurriedly added, "Just occasionally. If you don't want to meet me, even seeing you from afar would be enough." But Mom still ignored me. She kept her back to me. My heart sank, little by little. I slowly let go of her hand. But in an instant, my mother had me in her arms. She was trembling. She held me tightly. Her tears soaked my shoulder. "Zoe, I'm sorry, it's Mommy who's sorry. I couldn't take you away back then for reasons I couldn't tell you. All these years I worked so hard abroad, studying and earning money, only so I could come back sooner and take you away from your father. Mommy never wanted to abandon you. I'm sorry, you must blame me, you must hate me. It's my fault that you've suffered all these years." She cried for a long time before she let me go. I reached up and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. "Mom, I never blamed you. These years, I haven't suffered at all, really. I just miss you very much." My mother had my injuries documented. Then she immediately sued Dad. That day, Mom took me to her home. "This is your bedroom." I looked at the room before me. My eyes welled up again. On the bed was my favorite Nick Fox plush, the room was still decorated in my favorite green, a little night lamp Mom used for bedtime stories stood by the bed, and on the desk sat the little wooden pig toy she had carefully carved for me. I threw myself into my mother's arms. This embrace, last life, I had lost it. I thought this life she would reject me. But unexpectedly, she came back. Mother held me, patted my back, trying to lull me to sleep. But I wasn't sleepy at all. Brimming with energy, I chattered on, telling her about everything that had happened to me these past few years. Although father treated me poorly, I didn't care. For 4 years I had been studying hard, I read thousands of books, and I could tell the stories in them to mother, every detail, as if they were my own. Mom, you still don't know that I've been top of my grade all along, do you? I said proudly. My mother's face was all smiles, she kissed my forehead. Zoe, your mother knows. I felt a little disappointed. I had wanted to surprise her. Mom continued, actually, I came to every parent-teacher meeting, I just didn't go in, I watched you from a distance. I was afraid that if I saw you, I wouldn't be able to help staying. But I had nothing, how could I compete with your father for custody, or give you a good life? Can you forgive me? My eyes lit up. So you came back on the day Dad got married too, didn't you? Mom nodded sheepishly. At that time, I had just been abroad for a month away from you. I missed you so much I was close to losing sleep, so I secretly bought a ticket to come see you. I never expected to run into your father, he was getting married. So every time I thought I saw my mother's silhouette, it wasn't a hallucination. It was real. I held my mother tightly. It turned out that while I was longing for her, she was missing me just the same. Mom also told me about her days studying abroad. At first I didn't dare tell you the truth, because I was afraid you couldn't bear it, afraid I would disappoint you. So I pretended I didn't want you anymore and gave your custody to your father. Then I went abroad with my university advisor's son, who is your Uncle Liam. When I first arrived there, I missed you every day, I couldn't speak the language, and my studies had fallen years behind. You don't know how many times I wanted to give up, but whenever I thought of you, I found strength to keep fighting. That night, my mother and I talked until we were exhausted, yet neither of us wanted to sleep. Mom, will I still see you tomorrow? Could this be a dream? Silly Zoe, Mom will never leave you again. Go to sleep. When I opened my eyes again, I found the space beside me empty. A crushing panic overwhelmed me. I cried out for Mom in a frantic voice. My mother, cooking in the living room, rushed into the room. What's wrong? Seeing the anxious look on my mother's face, I finally let out a breath. Thank goodness, it really wasn't a dream. Before the court hearing, my father tried to reach my mother many times, but she refused to see him each time. In the end, he came to me. Dad can give your custody to your mother, but you must agree to donate bone marrow to your little brother. If not, I'll hire the best lawyers and fight this case. I turned and told my mother what Dad had said. She was furious, seeing red. She called Dad immediately. Austin, you bastard. I'm telling you, find whatever lawyer you want, I'll fight the case, but don't you dare expect my daughter to donate bone marrow. She will never donate in her life. After Mom hung up, she looked at me. I'm sorry, Mom shouldn't have spoken so loudly in front of you, and I shouldn't have insulted your father in front of you either. I shook my head. It's okay, and actually I think Mom is right. Anyway, I don't want this father anymore. After we said that, we smiled at each other. Dad did indeed contact a law firm and hired the best lawyer in town, a lawyer extremely authoritative in civil matters of marriage and child custody battles. Dad offered $1 million. He invited the other party to meet him. But when he arrived, he only found Mom there. He frowned and snapped at her, "Were you following me?" I'm telling you, I'm about to meet a very powerful lawyer. By then I'm going to make you kneel and beg me." Mom smiled coldly. She took out her lawyer's license. "Is that so, Mr. Austin? The person you were looking for, could it possibly be me?" Dad's eyes widened. "You? How could it be you?" Mom sneered, "What did you think I went abroad for back then? I majored in law at university. My advisor wanted to give me the overseas study spot when I graduated, but I stayed in the country because of you. I came here to tell you this case, you're bound to lose. With that she left proudly. Dad wouldn't give up and sought other lawyers. But when they saw the specifics of the case and learned that Mom was the plaintiff, they all said they were powerless to help. In the end, in court, Mom not only successfully fought for my custody, she also won a sizable sum in compensation. Of course, future child support would not be withheld for a single cent. Later, Wintert's condition deteriorated rapidly. Still no suitable bone marrow donor could be found. Father came clutching money, begging Mom to save his son. But Mom just hurled the money in his face and told him to get lost. With no other choice, Father finally had to try a tissue match with his son, but it failed. In the end, he died of his illness. Sophia went insane. She blamed my father and me for her son's death. She forced my father to kill me. My father, of course, refused. She made a huge fuss about it. Every day she found new ways to break things in the house. At first, Dad would placate her, buying things to comfort her. But over time, Sophia even started punching and kicking him. Dad grew tired of it. He began to regret divorcing my mother all those years ago. He started calling her constantly. Of course, Mom ignored him completely. In the end she blocked all of his contact information. Later, after Sophia slashed his arm with a knife, Dad finally reached his limit and filed for divorce from her. Sophia of course refused. She believed I was the one who had killed her son and ruined her life. So she ambushed me on my way to school, intending to kill me and avenge her son. But Mom had already taken precautions. She hired bodyguards to protect me at all times, everywhere. When Sophia charged at me with a knife, a bodyguard kicked her hard enough to send her flying. In the end, Mom charged Sophia with intentional injury. At the trial, Sophia spat curses, hurled abuse at me and my mother, and vowed that one day she would kill me to avenge her son. Even the judge grew weary. Ultimately, she was convicted of attempted intentional injury and sentenced to 3 years in prison. After leaving the courtroom, Dad stood before me and Mom, his face drawn with fatigue, and mumbled, "I'm sorry." Mom snorted coldly, not even willing to spare him a glance. "Austin, from the time our daughter got sick and you refused to pay even $5,000, I stopped considering you Zoe's father." Dad was stunned. I didn't. In this life, he truly didn't. But in that moment, I became certain Mom really had been reborn. Dad turned to me with a pleading look. I squeezed Mom's hand firmly. "I only have you, Mom, not Dad." Later, I heard Sophia went mad in prison. She spent every day searching for her son. When Mom heard, she only said one thing, "Serves her right." I once asked Mom if there was anyone she liked. I wouldn't mind if she found another partner. I didn't want her to be lonely. But Mom said, "With you, I'm not lonely. Besides, I'm busy with work every day now, I'm fulfilled." When I heard my mother say that, I was actually very happy. Because I didn't want anyone to take away my mother's love. Not even the slightest bit. After that, my mother moved us to a new home. I never saw my father again. I don't know whether he never tried to find me, or whether my mother wouldn't let him see me. Many years later, I found someone I loved. On the wedding day, an old man with a stooped figure lingered outside my ceremony for a long time. After we exchanged a single distant glance, he fixed his murky eyes on me. His mouth opened, a silent murmur, "Good girl, Zoe." It made me think of a man from the depths of my childhood who once lifted me high above his head. In an instant I looked away. In the audience my mother watched me and shed tears of happy excitement. I smiled, content. The person I care about most is by my side. That's enough. Everyone else is irrelevant.